Like rejecting God is worse than stagnating. But stagnating
Oh,
is either.
yeah, no, that's a very good point, and I didn't sort of think about that, but you're absolutely right.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible.
Today is day 305, covering Luke 19 and 20. I'm forgetting the last time that you didn't introduce in an Irish accent of
Yeah,
some.
that was meant to be Welsh, and I was
Oh,
trying to get Welsh sorted in my head, and then that came out, and I sort of had to stick with it.
yeah, well, there you go. Love
Hmm.
that.
I don't know who
So
I am anymore, Booth. I don't know who I am.
we can do the same trick as yesterday to get more people watching. So was that Southern Irish or Northern
Heck,
Irish?
it was meant to be Welsh, mate, so I ain't got a clue.
Well, comment if you think that was Northern Irish or if you think it was Southern Irish. If you're from either of those places, that we'd love to know what just came out
Or
of
if,
Adam's mouth.
or if you just want me to stop doing accents altogether.
Yeah, that's a fair. I might add a couple of comments to that, but just
All
make some
right,
fake accounts. Just
cool.
kidding. Anyways, no,
Yeah,
fantastic.
let's jump into a bit more Luke, shall we? So Luke 19 verse 4. I love a mini miracle. I've mentioned them several times. Back from the axe head floating to Jesus walking through a crowd. This one could potentially be the miniest miracle of all, because this is talking about Zacchaeus, the tax collector, who was a little man, as we know from a very popular Christian song growing up, which you probably have no idea. Um, yeah, I'm not going to go there. But he climbed a sycamore fig tree. So this was while Jesus was entering Jericho. Now, if you just Google Jericho and look at the images, there aren't a whole lot of trees. This is like desert, Middle East, like not a lot of trees going on. This
Right.
sycamore fig tree has grown there so that Zacchaeus can climb it to see Jesus, that Jesus sees him and goes to his house for dinner. But like, how many times would this tiny little seed have grown into a tiny little sapling, grown into a tiny little tree, and not been like cut down, trampled, pulled out the ground, taken
Right.
out for firewood, for building supplies, for anything, grown to the extent that a man can climb it to get above the crowd?
Yeah, that's
Like,
cool, man.
yeah, when you put, I think someone mentioned that to me once. I'm going to say Steve Lamb, I think, but could be wrong. And I was like, actually, that's pretty banging that.
That's really
Um,
cool.
but yeah, and then this whole section there, because I have a bunch of notes here from Uganda in 2011, which would factor in with Steve being the one that mentioned it. It is Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house for tea. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Like, he was a very unpopular figure. He was a chief tax collector, right? And
Yep.
so this was like a life-changing encounter for him
Yep.
to meet
Yes.
with Jesus. And
Yep.
then in verse 8, it says, Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, I give half my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anyone out of out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount." So his life was changed, and then out the back of it, his heart was changed
Yep.
because he then vowed to give that all back. And Jesus said, like, salvation's come to you.
Yep.
And so just that whole story in itself is just so big and cool.
Yeah, that's really good, man. The thing about the tree is really interesting because it's one of two things. Either, like you said, it's like this little seed that became a sapling and eventually grew over years just for this one event, or since God can do any miracle he wants, it could just have been like immediately there, and then some bloke just is like, "Oi, where'd that fig tree come from?"
Yeah,
Had a
because
bit
who
too much
was it? It
fun.
was Jonah, wasn't it? That he had the tree grow up overnight and
Yeah,
then wither overnight. So it could have been. That's interesting. I hadn't thought that.
really interesting. Okay, so then Luke 19, verse 24, he said to those standing by, "Take his mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. So be grateful to God for what he gives you and make the most of it, because if you do, more will be given to you." Whereas, is this parable of the talents that I'm doing here?
It's the 10 minas, which
Yeah, right.
I think it's the
Basically,
same.
yeah. So yeah, just whatever gifts that God has given you, use them wisely, right? And more will be given to you
Yeah,
if you do that, if you
yeah.
manage God's gifts to you well and got what God gives you. So anyway, that's that.
I like it. On that same point, I pulled something out of this which was a little bit different that we've missed before. And it was along the lines of, it starts in here saying, a man of noble birth went to a different country to have himself appointed king, then to return. So this dude was like a fairly seemingly unpopular figure in that. But what I took out of it was right at the end. Well, okay, 2 points. Firstly, the dude that just had the one talent or mean or whatever, he just let it sit, and so it stagnated. Basically, it didn't grow. He didn't lose anything, but it stagnated, and stagnation is actually quite bad because things just go wrong. It's not the worst though, because in verse 27, when the king then sort of comes back and he's like, give the one who had one to the one who had 10, etc., he said, but those enemies of mine who did not want me to be a king over them, bring them in here and kill them in front of me. So it's like stagnation's not good, but the people that didn't want him to be king in the first place, which sounds like it didn't include this fellow with the one talent, they get burned and killed. So like they didn't want him to be king, but he became king. And so when he came back, like rejecting God is worse than stagnating, but stagnating either.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I didn't sort of think about that, but you're absolutely right. It's definitely better to stagnate than to reject God. But ultimately, yeah, as you say, don't do either. So then 1944, they will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you. So this is actually Jesus predicting the fall of Jerusalem at the hands of the Romans, which I thought I'd written the date, but apparently I haven't. But this absolutely did happen. This is a prediction, and this is exactly what then happened.
Yeah.
At some point, I want to say AD 70 plus, somewhere there, but I didn't write it down.
Can't remember exactly. Yeah. No, it's really cool, isn't it? I love it. I was chatting with Melody's dad earlier, and he has been watching a bunch of YouTube videos recently. I think along the lines of the Shroud of Turin, along the lines that we mentioned before about the flooding or Moses splitting the Red Sea, and like the chariot like remains that they found in there. And you certainly want to think about the sulfur rain in Sodom and Gomorrah, whatever it was. Like he mentioned a few other ones like that, and it's just so cool that the stuff that was written actually happened, and there is geographical evidence today that proves it. So
well, while we're on that subject, I just shout out to a YouTube channel called Answers in Genesis. Like if you're interested in, proof of the Bible, that a lot of it is backed up scientifically as well, it's mind-blowing channel. I've been looking a lot at like the flood and the fossil records and all that lately, and they have some some of these are like Harvard scientists who have like come to Christ or have been Christians and now are using their God-given scientific talent to prove the Bible and its word and its authority. So yeah, it's great stuff. I'll keep going, mate. Honestly, my next points are, well, if we get around to them, we get around to them.
All right, cool. So we've kind of touched on this before, but I'm going to go over it again because it's pretty big. Luke 20 verses sort of 6 to 8. This is where Jesus's authority is being questioned, and people being like, they discussed it, and he was chatting about the baptism from John. Is that human or God origin? And they say all the people, human origin, all the people will stone us, because if what the smeg. Oh, they answered. Oh, that's right. He asked them that question. They responded, "We don't know." And he said, "Neither will I tell you the authority by which I'm doing these things." Because they were questioning him. He threw a question on them. They didn't answer, so he didn't answer. And it's just like, actually, sometimes people aren't going to listen. And we don't have to pose answers to everything that people are asking us. Because if they've got hardened hearts and they're not going to listen to the answers, like leave them questioning, leave them wanting more. It's better than trying to come up with an answer that they're just going to like, "Oh, that's wrong."
Yeah.
Like, work it out for yourself, mate.
That's good, man. That's good.
Got there in the end.
Yeah. You've probably got enough time to squeeze this one in if you want it.
A tiny little one. I'm going to mention this a couple of times. This is then towards the end of that section, the parable of the tenants. Jesus looked directly at them, 20 verse 17, and asked, "Then what is the meaning of that which is written? The stone the builders rejected, has become the cornerstone." I love this. Jesus looked directly at them. I think you try and put yourself in their shoes, and that authority that he brings, and asking that question, like, "I'm telling you what this is meaning, but you answer it. Go on." Like,
love that. Yeah, that's great. Cool. Well, so tomorrow's readings are going to be Luke 21 and 22. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, share, do all those good things. See ya.